everyone, my name is Elaine, and today I want to take a little bit of time to talk about everything I wish I knew when I first started playing Unison League. Number 1 on my list is the right way to plus 198 your gear. If you don't know what I'm talking about or you want to learn a little bit more about this, please check out my video. The link will be in the description. I actually made a tutorial about this and you can watch that and learn a little bit more. But basically, and I talk about this in my video, when I first started playing, I thought that the best way to do this was to take your tapsies and your other +1s and +10s and just shove them into whatever you are that you were trying to 198. And this isn't the case. You wind up using a lot more gold than you need to, and that's really, really bad for newer players because usually you don't have access to tons of gold. The best thing to do is to take a normal piece of gear, so literally the worst type of gear in the game, and put all of your +1s in that until you get to 198, and then put it in the gear that you want to 198 plus, so usually you are. You'll wind up spending a lot less gold, and this is the most efficient way to do that. Wish I knew that, because quite frankly, I didn't break 100k very often back then, and it's really, really sad to think about. The second thing I wish I knew was not to level too quickly. When I first started playing, I assumed that leveling quickly was really important, and one of the things that you really, really needed to do in order to become a top tier player, but this isn't really the case. While leveling up can help because it gives you more cost and more gear slots to utilize, it doesn't actually make you a better player because you have to equip things. So if you're not equipping things, which quite frankly I wasn't, I was very underleveled for a while, then you're not going to become a good player. When you level too quickly and you're not equipping things, you become underleveled for your level. Essentially, your gear score isn't suitable to your level, it's very low for your level, and it becomes harder to do quests on your own. You're probably going to get left behind if you're trying to run events like Mobius. You're probably going to get killed really easily in Coliseum and not contribute to your team very much. And in guild battles, your contributions probably aren't going to be what they could have been if you didn't level as quickly. You leveled at a slower pace and allowed yourself to equip gear as you went along so you could get stronger. The third thing I wish I knew was the rule pertaining to defense constants. Technically, you can wear as many defense constants as you want, but only 2 max will proc together. Another one of my former guildmates described it this way. It's more about wearing 2 for each type of constant, not the helm or armor. So for instance, you can put on 2 reflect reduction gear, but if you do, you should not put on something like a damage reduction constant because you can only have 2 max. Conversely, you can have 2 attack constant on as well as having 2 defense constants. So for me, I just tend to avoid this type of gear. Usually they're not as strong anyway, and then I don't have to get confused about the wording and like the actual permutations of how this rule works with the 2 max limit. But I know, especially when I first started playing, I assumed, oh, if this is constantly firing, then that's so much better than all the other types of gear. And I just equipped tons of defense constants because I didn't know about the rule and the limit. And it just seemed like I was doing a great thing because this thing was always going off, according to me in my new brain. But that's not the case. There is a rule about this. There's a 2 max limit. Probably best to just avoid it if you find this confusing and wear different types of gear, which as far as I'm concerned are typically better. That opinion is just that, an opinion, so you might disagree with me. Let me know if you do down below in the comments, or if you want to expand on what I'm saying now to help out newer players, that would be great. The fourth thing I wish I knew was how playing a defensive character makes you less versatile. I don't think it's a secret at this point that my first class ever was a cleric, and clerics were one of the 2 more defensive classes that existed when I first started playing. The extra classes like the Berserker didn't exist when I first started playing this game years ago. And like a quote, good cleric, I put a lot of my cost, pretty much all of my cost, into my defense stats. So armor, helmets, I equipped tons of clothing, didn't really put as much emphasis on my monsters and on my weapons. So I could be really tanky and make sure I was doing the maximum amount of healing that I could do. And I was, quote, the ideal traditional support cleric. And I was an ideal, quote, cleric, traditional support cleric. But now that I'm farther along in the game, more of a veteran player, I'm finding that it's very hard to go back and multi-class because of this build. Essentially, because I've put so much of my cost into these defensive stats, it's basically impossible to be an effective DPS character. I just don't have enough stat and cost in my monster and my weapon stats, which are usually what are utilized in order to do tons and tons of damage for DPS classes. At this point, I could transition to a rook, but even they don't do tons of damage. So ideally, if you want to multi-class, start off with the DPS, emphasize those monsters, emphasize those weapons, and don't put tons of cost into your defense stats because it's going to be very, very hard for you to transition to new classes when you multi-class. And ultimately, proves my point, you're just not as versatile if you make one of these traditional defensive support builds. Number 5 is how your room leveling usually works. Some of you might not know about this because I feel like not as many people use it anymore. But a couple years ago, this new feature came out where you could make a room. Basically, you'd get some furniture from a special spawn. You'd put it in your room, you could decorate it, and that furniture you could level by equipping it and then running quests. And usually there's some sort of skill involved, like a slight reduction to your chances of being confused or blinded or something of that nature. And not as much anymore, but you used to all the time see people in the lobby just being like, I'll like your room for a like, and like my room please, and all this stuff, because they didn't really understand how this room leveling actually works. Basically, you can get as many likes as you want, but it doesn't benefit you or help you level up your room, so you can equip more furniture and then slightly increase your gear score. Essentially, the only way you can level this up is by liking 5 other rooms a day, and you can track that within the room feature. And those 5 things let you level up very slowly. I think I was on like level 14 or 15 before it started getting glitchy. It took over a month to do this. So it's a very slow process, but you could keep adding gear this way, or rather adding to your gear score this way by equipping the furniture and then getting those skills, which aren't particularly helpful, but they could help in certain situations. And I didn't really get that when I first started. I thought that I just wanted everyone to like my room, and I'm sure I've asked people to like my room back then, not understanding that this is what this was, but now I know, and now you do too. Number 6 on my list is that treasure spawns are code for it's a trap. Treasure spawns are probably the spawns that we know the most and the things that pop up the most in the spawn section, but they're not typically very, very good spawns. They typically boast really nice shiny gear. They usually have the new monsters and the new weapons and things of that nature. But because they also include medals and things like that, they're also like awakening orbs at this point, and droplets and full drops of ether. They're really not the best spawns to be doing, especially if you're a newer player. Typically, when you're doing the actual spawn itself, you don't get any good gear from that. I know a few people who've gotten lucky and actually gotten the featured monster or the featured gear from the spawn portion itself, so not the chests. But I don't see this happen very frequently. Typically, with this type of spawn, you have to spend hundreds of gems. I'd say usually in the range of 800 to 1,000, to be fair, to maybe pull one from the spawn itself, whatever that featured gear is. So the monster typically is at the featured gear, and then they also have the defense gear and the weapons in there, which you can pull from the chests. You typically don't get any from chests. Maybe you get like 1 or 2, but usually you have to save up all of those medals. Usually it's around 10,000 or so. It varies, but I see 10,000 a lot for the main featured piece of gear, main featured monster. Hundreds upon hundreds of gems just to get one copy of this monster, and it's ridiculous. Yes, you're going to get other things along the way. You'll probably get a lot of the other featured defensive gear and a lot of the featured weapons. They're probably not going to be for your class. You're probably going to have to depend on the medal exchange to get the kinds of things that you want. So as a general rule, especially for noobs, just don't do this spawn. It's not good for you. Wait for class spawns. It's how I got where I am today. They're the best. You guaranteed get something that you need. Usually they're infused several times. And while it might have a hefty price tag to do it once and it's kind of hard to save, it's usually what's going to benefit you most. So that would be my suggestion. The last thing on my list, number 7, is basically the importance of elemental gear. I think because I've played so many other video games and because I kind of saw this chart just around in Unison, I figured out what beats what. Like, water is strong against fire and light is strong against dark. But I didn't realize quite how important this was. And what I mean by this is making a character that is balanced, because if you have too much of one type of gear, you're likely to get slaughtered in quests where, let's say if you have a lot of fire gear and the quest has a lot of water monsters, then you're probably going to get killed. Or if you're in a guild battle and you're wearing a lot of fire gear and then the other team throws a lot of monsters that are water, you're probably going to get killed. So try to balance it, A. And B, just the importance of saving these types of elemental gear for your long-term game. Basically, when I first started playing, I was like, well, this is a crappy 26 cost. I don't want this anymore. Like after the 30 started coming out, because 26s were actually really good when I started playing. Yeah, that's how long I've been playing. Anyway, I digress. So basically, I would get rid of these pieces of gear, not realizing that it was good to save them for when hard quests came out, because you need that kind of elemental gear to get through the quest. Even if it's like lower end, you can just swap it out once you get better gear, but just save it in the beginning because you can't do the hard quests or even do particularly well in Mobius if you don't have the elemental advantage. So let's say the quest that you're doing has a lot of wind monsters, you want tons of fire gear. If the quest features lots of dark monsters, you probably want, or rather you definitely want a lot of star and light gear. Basically, you need to plan ahead. That's all I'm saying. You need to plan ahead, keep all of your elemental gear, even if it's terrible. And once you have enough slots filled out, get rid of the crappier gear, update it for slightly better gear, and then keep building so that you're more versatile and you can do more things. So there you have it. That's my list of everything I wish I knew when I first started playing this game, aka Unison League. What did you think of my list? Did you miss something? Did you share my experience? Let me know down below in the comments. I'd really like to know what you guys think and what your experience was when you first started playing. Did you make a lot of the same mistakes? I want to know that. I'm sure we all did. It's a hard game to learn, to be honest, when you first start playing. Thanks everyone for watching this video. Please note that any corrections and/or clarifications will be listed down below in the description section. And if you like what you saw here today, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'd always like to know what you guys think down below in the comments. Also, hit that notification bell so you know what's up, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye guys!